And how much of an impact did Steve Entman have on your development?
Well, he was a defensive tackle, so
Yeah, your
I
defensive
guess the
tackle,
big thing, yeah,
the
yeah.
one-on-ones and
Well,
stuff. Yeah.
what most people don't realize is that when I went to college, I was actually a defensive lineman too. It was Mike Lustig, Steve Entman, and myself. We were the 1988 class of defensive linemen at University of Washington, and I later moved over to offense. But Steve was one of those impact players that make a when you get him on your team, you hate to play against him, but you love to play with him because he's going to disrupt a lot of things. So he caused a lot of havoc on a lot of offensive lines. You had the double, sometimes triple team, and that's when all the other guys like Donald Jones and those guys can make plays. So he was a big disruptor in college.
Yeah. How was the Pac-10 back then? I I think y'all were the year when y'all went to the Rose Bowl a couple times, right? Against Iowa and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What it seemed like a shoe-in you would be at USC, Tony Baselli. Then you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. I mean, that was the thing. So when I took my recruiting trip to SC,
Uh-huh.
I was one of 48 recruits on that
Wow.
weekend, and
Oh
they
yeah.
only had 18 scholarships. So I had already heard horror stories of guys committing to USC and not being able to get a scholarship, and I was hoping that that didn't happen to me. The thing is, most people don't realize is that I, even though I had a lot of success playing, I never really thought I was that great of a player. So, I was humbled when SC came calling the pageantry, the victory and all that stuff in LA, and it's LA. I mean, what's not to like? It had everything that you could possibly want, but I was fearful that if I chose there, I didn't get a scholarship, and because I came from humble beginnings, I
Right.
wouldn't have had a chance to go to college. So it worried me. So I kind of wrote them off my list pretty quickly and I wanted to get out of California, as I said before. So, going to SC was just too close to home for me.
When did you know that you were going to play in the NFL?
The
At what
moment I
point?
saw, yeah, the moment I saw a bunch of scouts watching me practice, that's when it kind of hit me. There have been some people talking about it, but those people trying to get in your ear, talking about, let me represent you, that type of thing. But it was after it was during my junior year when we were having success. We went to the Rose Bowl and won the national championship. My
Mhm.
junior year, people had come up to me and said, "Look, you could be a first round draft choice." I was being compared to Bob Whitfield out of Stanford, the
Whitfield.
tackle that came out of here. Bob went to Atlanta the year before I did,
Yeah.
and and so people were comparing us. Greg Skrepnik was another one that was up there and stuff like that. So there were a lot of tackles that were highly sought after, and I was like, you know what? I Two things that stood in my mind. The first and foremost is I promised my mom a degree because I went to
Mhm.
college very early in a very young age. I promised my mom I wouldn't leave without a degree. The second thing, like as I said before, college was fun. I was enjoying the lifestyle, so I was like, the NFL can wait. I'm cool.
Uh-huh. How was blocking for Napoleon Kaufman back then? How was that experience?
Very easy until he ran into my backside. He used to run into my backside because he didn't want to get hit. So I used to tell him, "Look, dude, you got to find the hole."
Uh-huh.
First, he was like, "Just move," trying to move me. But it was funny because I helped recruit Napoleon when he came to college out of Lompoc, and
Mhm.
I remember hosting him that weekend. Supali Malamala, the other big tackle next to me in that picture,
Uh-huh.
we were standing around, and Napoleon stood in between us, and he said, "Lo, if I come here, you're my tackles." And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Oh, I'm coming here." So we sealed the deal, but it was really easy because you didn't have to hold holes open long for Napoleon to get through. He was that quick.
Yeah, shout out to Deacon 305, man. He just wanted to say what's up to you, man. Barbershop
What's up?
conversation. Luke King, Brother Lincoln. Was he really the strongest and the fastest on the team? Because
I
that
wouldn't
was
say
his
he was the strongest, but no,
pound for
he was
pound.
probably one of the strongest running backs on the team. There's no doubt about it. I mean, but you think about it, he wasn't a big guy, so
Yeah, I
he
know.
had to have muscle, and he did it. He took the weight training really quickly, and I would say that he was probably the strongest running back. He's probably the only running back I know could bench well over 400 pounds. So he was a beast. He was strong, but the wear and tear, especially that year that we had at Oakland with Bugle when he
Uh-huh.
carried the ball, I think close to 300 times that season, that just took it out of him because it started to show that he just couldn't keep up as much as he wanted to.
Wow. How was your NFL draft experience? What's that like for a tackle? Because y'all don't get too much TV time. They always want to
No, we
do the
don't.
five and
They would do the
what's
pretty boys.
Yeah.
What was interesting is that, I came out at a time where the only people that really went to New York were the high profiles, the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and stuff like that. I had no desire to want to go to New York City. So my agents were out of Dallas, and they rented a ballroom at the Marriott for my family and friends to come in and watch the draft. Now, I had been projected to go pretty high, but did because the year before when Tony Mandrich came out of Michigan State and was basically written off as a bust, a lot
Yeah.
of people were a little leery of taking a tackle in the top five. But it was weird because the number three team. So we going into the draft, it was popularly known that Drew Bledsoe and Rick Meyer, two quarterbacks, were going to be taken first with the first two picks because both New England and Seattle needed a quarterback. No one knew, who was going to go where, but it was assumed that they were going to go at that time. Then after that, people like me were on the list, could go number three to the Cardinals or what have you. The head coach of the Cardinals back then was Joe Bugle, and he was an offensive line coach, and he had talked to me all through the recruiting process after college saying, yo, man, I would love to take you. We can love to use you and stuff like that. But managers had let a little bad taste in general manager's mouth around the way. So I was on the phone for the Cardinals for a good bit. Then they ended up picking Garrett Hurst.
Yeah.
And then after that, there were a bunch of guys that were taken. I was on the phone with various teams, the possibility. And then it came to the number 8 pick, which was what New Orleans had. And New Orleans had my agent had told me, Scott Cashel, and he said, look, there's a kid coming out of Louisiana Tech named Willie Roaf. He's a high profile tackle. And it makes sense if New Orleans picks him because you sell tickets. You get a local kid, you sell tickets, brings in. And I was like, that's fine. Because my goal going into the draft is I wanted to be the first tackle taken. That's what I was hoping for. And so when New Orleans did what they did, it made sense. I got on the phone directly after that with Atlanta. Ken Herrock was the general manager and president of the team, and he said, we're looking for a tackle. And he was like, his vision was that it would be Bob Whitfield and I, the franchise bookends for the Atlanta Falcons. And so I, was looking for the opportunity, looking for the chance. Didn't really know much about the run and shoot, but thought that I could be a chameleon and play in anything.
Right, right. Before we move forward, Reggie Owens has a question for you. What are your thoughts on Darrell Russell and his death?
One of the reasons why I wanted to get away from home was because you had to separate yourself from your past to create your own new future. D. Russ, when he came to the Raiders, I was familiar with his family, a lot of people, his relatives from Southeast San Diego, and I tried to take him under my wing. But one of the things about D. Russ is that he couldn't leave San Diego behind. He brought a lot of his friends and people up, and it's natural because look, when you're in this position, first thing that you hear about is people say, don't forget where you come from and remember us and stuff like that. And so you try to do the honorable thing, but there are times where there's those bad seeds can drag you under. And it was unfortunate because D. Russ just could not get out of his own way and had all the promise, all the talent. He could have been a superstar. I was extremely saddened by his death because just couldn't get through to him. He just couldn't leave his past. And I'm not saying, his people from San Diego brought him down or anything like that, but I'm just saying that, he had issues with drugs and alcohol and, he liked to live the lifestyle and stuff like that. And that car crash was not a surprise to me in Los Angeles because again, there was another kid that came out of San Diego that went to SC, was a star on the West Coast, all up and down California, from the Bay Area to Los Angeles to San Diego. He was VIP everything, and sometimes he's just hard to think those things.
Hmm.